Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell, and we're bored of it, and welcome to our review of Rewild South America, a game that is weirdly timely with the Studio Ghibli meme craze, as the art style is somewhat similar there, although thankfully the art isn't AI like the memes.
Rewild, for 1 to 4 players, will see you rewilding terrain in South America to improve the biodiversity and attract various plants, animals, and insects to that region. This is going to be done through engine building, tile placement, and card play. And before we get into how to play the game and what we think, please note we were provided this as a review copy by the publisher.
Rewild will see players taking turns back and forth until the end of the game is triggered. And on a turn, a player will play one single action card and take one action from that card, of which there are 2 available options. Once a card has been played, you're unable to use it again until such a time as you play the action card that lets you reclaim all of your played cards, and that costs you a turn. Whilst this mechanism was made famous by Concordia many years ago, we think it's still a great one, pushing players to weigh up whether they should try and spin out their turns as long as possible, or bite the bullet and reclaim their cards because they just need to use that one card again, even though they've only played 3. Because each card has 2 possible actions, some of which are unique to a single card, it's even spicier deciding what to play when and when to pick up than usual.
Pretty much any of these action cards is going to allow you to build terrain types on your player board. And there are 3 different terrain types: rainforests, grasslands, and scrublands, each with a different size of hexagonals they take up. Now, any of these will cost a combination of water and materials, your resources in this game. But interestingly, if you've already built grasslands or a scrubland, they will cheapen the cost of adjacent tiles. Now, you can also, on these action cards, take actions to get resources or upgrade the terrain you've built. So rainforests can be upgraded by getting a 3-dimensional tree added to them. The grasslands can be flipped over into wetlands, and the scrublands will just get an additional hexagonal tile.
The whole point of building these tiles is to attract wildlife. The central board forms a card marketplace with wildlife, prey, and plant cards, but mostly you'll be attracting the wildlife. This is free, but you do have to have the required number of free spaces in order to attract the wildlife, matching the habitats that each creature can live in, and then you mark spaces on your player board with tokens to show that they are occupied. The wildlife cards have scoring conditions which are either instant or end of game. For example, score 3 points for every rainforest symbol in your tableau.
You can also attract 1 prey card and 1 plant card on your turn. Now, prey, they want to eat wildlife, so you can attract them for free if you have a wildlife card in a habitat they can live in that they want to eat. Crucially though, they cover up that wildlife card. So if it's endgame scoring, or if that card has endgame scoring, you will never score it. So it's quite a spicy decision. Plant cards, on the other hand, cost seeds, the 3rd resource in the game. And they do a whole variety of things. They might just give you victory points, they might give you resources instantly, they might give you extra symbols for scoring, or even additional terrain tiles to place wildlife on. There are a few different ways the game can end, such as a player filling their entire board with tiles, but in our experience, the game has always ended when a player has 8 animal cards in their tableau, at which point you'll score all the endgame scoring cards you've acquired after playing a kind of final round. This makes it quite a tense, tight race because you're always keeping an eye on your opponent with their animals, and it's kind of this race to get 8 animals, and it's quite thrilling and nail-biting.
Rewild is a game that comes together very well, with a nice balance between the constant reduction of choices as you play your action cards, the spatial puzzle of the tile laying, and the hard graft of setting yourself up to score big points. It provokes some strong player engagement, and something we noticed with our plays is it has that feeling of constantly feeling like I just need one more tile, one more card, one more resource. You never finish your turn feeling quite 100% satisfied. You're now just focusing on that next thing that you need to do. The urgency to attract that new wildlife card that just got flipped after your turn ended.
Despite the theme and the artwork, this is actually probably the most tense game we've maybe played so far this year.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this is from the way that you're worrying about 4 or 5 different things at once. You're worried that your opponent is going to snipe a card you want from the marketplace. You're worried that they're getting a little close to 8 animals and they're going to end the game before you're ready. And because you score points during the game, and a lot of those points, you're also worried by how far they're moving up the score track, even though you still know you've got a lot of endgame points coming. It means that it's quite engaging and competitive, even though it is somewhat solitaire multiplayer when you're taking your own turn. But you still do care about what your opponents are doing, what terrain they've built, and kind of definitely how many animals they have.
What we like most about Rewild is the variety in decision making when measured against the rules overhead. It's fairly simple to pick up and play, but there's a lot of variety in what you can do and in what you can score for, which means you make many small decisions per game, which can lead to quite different outcomes and, in a sense, different feels in an individual game. For example, in the first game, Farrell didn't touch upgrading any terrain, but in the third game, he went entirely for rainforests and upgrading them with trees, which means you can put a second animal on the same space, which is a lot of fun to puzzle out.
The great variety in scoring conditions on wildlife cards and the different things plant cards can do to supplement your play means that although each game is following the same pattern, your engine will end up wildly different. I really enjoy games where you make your scoring conditions yourself, and Rewild totally succeeds at making this engaging and fun. Coming to our criticisms of Rewild, the core of them is the same as the core of any issue in any game like this, which is the randomness due to a large card deck. So there are 2 specific issues that we have. First is that occasionally in the game, the pace will stagnate because players will not be interested in what's in the marketplace, which shuffles along very rarely. And because you kind of build up your engine and your strategy, if there's nothing there for you, then it's not interesting and you don't really want to take it because it hastens the end of the game. So things can sometimes get a little slow. The second is that, and almost the opposite, sometimes cards can flip, which have a very significant effect for one player on the game. What I mean by this is mid to late game, you're going to be leaning hard into certain strategies. Maybe I'm all about rainforest symbols and tree symbols and animals in those terrains. Then if 3 rounds from the end, a card flips up that says get 4 points for every rainforest symbol you have, I'm going to be laughing because I've just scored an absolute bank load of points for no effort, basically. I already had a terrain tile free. And because you can kind of set up these engines and score so many points, I have seen it a few times now that almost a significant factor is that the right card flips for the right person. Whereas, your opponent also has their strategy built up, but they just don't get that card flipped for them. So I do think that generally the different strategies are balanced and the cards are balanced. I just find that sometimes if you've really gone into one thing, you can get lucky and get exactly what you need to give you another 25 points from one card, which is quite a lot in this game. Following on from that, at 2 players, this is going to be a different game than at 4 players. With a lower play count, the card marketplace is going to shift much slower. So you can kind of be more strategic, you can plan a little bit more long term based on what's there, although of course your opponent can still snack cards. But when you turn to 4 players, the entire card marketplace can be different by the time it gets round to your turn from what it was at the end of your turn. So you're going to have to be a little more tactical and a little more versatile.
There's also an expert mode, which has a few modular rule additions. And I think this is the mode we would always play going forward, just for the increased depth that it adds. One key change is certain cards now have preferred tile formations. If you can create these formations on your player board, then you will get some bonus points. So we think this is a really nice way of furthering the spatial puzzle whilst also creating an alternative avenue for scoring.
Another thing that adds in the modular elements is the fact that there's another side of the player board, and instead of scoring a handful of points for completing sets of certain cards in each habitat, you can now re-trigger an instant scoring card. And as already stated earlier in the review, if you can set up the right conditions, can get a lot of points from a single card. So it becomes this really engaging puzzle on getting the right set, but also having your scoring conditions in play at the right time to maximize points, because if you don't have it at the right time, then you're not going to get anything and kind of waste that. So there's a lot we like about the kind of advanced mode, and I think everything fits together really well in expanding the decision space and just making an overall more interesting game. Not that there's anything wrong with the base game, and that includes the modules we haven't touched upon. Final thoughts. Rewild South America was actually quite a difficult game to write the review for. I think in part that's because on the surface, if I tell you about it, it doesn't sound that interesting and it sounds quite familiar. You know, on your turn, you're going to play an action card, you're going to build a terrain, and then you're going to take an animal. That's what you do. It doesn't sound like a lot. And I just also can't quite put my finger on why this game is so tense and like pressurized, but it is, and I think that's what we really love about it.
Yeah.
And I think one thing we haven't mentioned is that it plays in a really nice time. It's like this really tight, tense hour at 2 players, and I just think it is really engaging for what it's doing, and it blends these familiar elements really well together to create something novel in the way that it's tense, at least.
Yeah, agree. I think that's what sets it apart from maybe other kind of maybe similar nature games. Obviously, nature theme is, you know, quite prolific.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that kind of tense nature and the engagement that you talked about that I think for me makes it unique. This is maybe personal preference, but we love games where you can't really tell who's going to win at the end of the game. And there's that kind of, we talked about it earlier in the review, but sometimes you can get a bit worried that your opponents are going like really ahead of you in game, but you could then claw it back at the end, and that kind of going around and putting all the final points in is super, super tense. And we personally love that kind of thing that keeps the tension high right until the very end, rather than someone, you know, being kind of guaranteed to run away with it. Yeah. So yeah, I really, really enjoy this game, and all of the elements come together really nicely, like you said.
Yep. So I think final thing to say is that this is, at the time of the review, going to be released on Kickstarter, I believe, or one of the crowdfunding websites. There'll be a link in the description within a day or two. And the reason we're calling this a review instead of a preview is that basically this is the game. I think we've worked with this publisher many times before, and they essentially don't change anything gameplay-wise, except for maybe 1 or 2 bonus cards. From the Kickstarter to the final production, they basically just kind of make graphical or component upgrades. So that is just why we're calling it a review. And to us, it's a finished game, and it feels finished, it feels balanced. So just keep that in mind, basically. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing, and please ask us any questions you might have about the game. We're more than happy to answer them. Thanks for watching. See ya.
Bye.